All right, thank you guys so much. We have another Seeing the World integrally video. Now, this is going to be a very fun video for me today because we're going to be synthesizing two of my personal intellectual heroes. Of course, that would be Gebser and Thomas Sowell. Today, we're going to be talking about Thomas Sowell, Gebser, and the Betrayal of the Intelligentsia. I'm going to be reading a Substack article of mine, and we're going to be getting into it. So essentially what this video is, remember, of course, with rationality, born from the discovery of perspectivity, objectified space. So rationality renders objects static, which sets them, and that renders their objectivity. So they are set, right? They're set. And then when you take objects and you place them in dualistic antithetical negation, one is privileged over the other. So we have a set order in which one thing is better than the other. This is how you form hierarchies. Now, of course, since the Renaissance, we've had hierarchies, objective hierarchies at that, whether it be political formation or organization, familial structures, societal structures, whatever it may be, academic knowledge structures. They are order. They are hierarchies of order created by the 3D mental consciousness structure. Of course, with arational integral structure, all of these objective orders, these objective hierarchies, what's happening is we are non-consciously realizing the fact that these are not objective. They are not set in stone. We are upsetting them, which we'll get into, and with that knowledge, we are empowering ourselves to break free of them. Now, this is either good or bad. It depends on what we're talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video. We're going to be talking about how the old order, the old hierarchy, the objective hierarchy, and the intelligentsia's place in it, after that has been upset, now we're going to be talking the effects that we're dealing with. So it's going to be very fun. I'm very excited. And I think this video is important because it's going to be a little microcosm of what is happening in all of sociology and all of society right now. The old ways of doing things, the objective, hierarchical order, natural law, whatever you want to call it, they're going. And we'll be getting into it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. This probably won't be too long. At the risk of sounding like I'm patting myself on the back, I think my articles are relatively thorough, so I might not add a ton of commentary, but I will maybe at the end if I think there's some points I want to add to. So let's get right into it. In his excellent work, Intellectuals in Society, Thomas Sowell, a personal hero of mine, records and laments the havoc and destruction wrought by frustrated intellectuals during the 20th and 21st centuries. Far from being a civilizational non-negotiable in the form of gatekeepers and distillers of wisdom, intellectuals have behaved like irrational, resentful, spoiled brats who would rather burn it all to the ground if it means avoiding coming to terms with the fact that they no longer retain the same high status as they did once before. Intellectuals are those whose end products are ideas. An engineer or farmer, for example, may be very intelligent, but they are not an intellectual. Philosophers, sociologists, historians, these are intellectuals. Of course, upon hearing the word intellectual, you may presuppose that the academics in question are inherently bright. This is not true, as evidenced by the litany of contemporary so-called intellectuals who bandy about bastardizing Nietzsche, Jung, or some Black Panther figure. They may be articulate, as Sowell reminds us, but they are not bright. Incidentally, you can gauge the worth of an intellectual, I've found, by investigating their economic opinions. I don't care how insightful Baudrillard's idea of the simulacrum proves. I've heard his economic takes. I agree with the simulacrum idea. I think it's efficacious. I think it's almost self-evident in the internet age, okay? Having said that, I'm not going to accept all your other stupid ideas. With a straight face, when you say that because you have to wear a uniform at work, you're being exploited as you run cover for the frickin' Marxist communists, get out of here. Nothing will undercut the universal validity of philosophy more than philosophers opening their mouths about any other subject. For centuries, the intelligentsia held a high-status position in the prospectively rigid hierarchies that dominated what Gebser and I would call the mental world. As I've stated in many articles, rationality was born from the discovery of perspectivity, that is, objectified space. You can learn more about this topic in detail here. So, as I said earlier in this video, rationality renders everything static, which makes it set, and then as we take the objects in the frame, if you will, and place them in opposition to each other, remember, 1, 2, 3. One is privileged over the other. This is how you get objective hierarchies. It is no surprise, then, that the rigid objective hierarchies became differentiated since the Enlightenment. This is not to suggest, by the way, that they did not exist at all in a literal sense. before this time. I'm not saying that literally no hierarchies existed before this. I'm just saying they weren't as qualitatively distinct. A patriarch or wealthy beneficiary would supply them, the intellectuals, with the funds to study and publish their works. In accordance with the rational way of relating objects to each other, either intelligence is distributed equally among everyone, the rationalist intellectual thinks, or it is distributed unequally among a limited few. The masses display extreme stupidity on an hourly basis, therefore we must privilege the latter. So, either, as I just said, intellectually is distributed amongst an elite few, or it's distributed equally widely. We know it's not the latter because the masses are so dumb, so it must be the elite few. They made a mistake. This is a false binary. They made a mistake. So, now that they are the elite few who are the cultivators and transmitters of wisdom, now they get to go to the patriarchs and the oligarchs and the kings and all that, and they say, hey, just fund me, and I'll do whatever you want, baby. I can give my art. I can give my theology of whatever, and you have a great spot as a member of the Intelligentsia. You have, well, we're going to get into it. And so the intellectual elite formed and sat firmly in the knowledge that they were the exclusive cultivators and transmitters of wisdom. Obviously, the social prestige and ego satisfaction of their place in the objective hierarchy provided intellectuals with an arrogance that could power 1,000 suns. A very important point. There's an objective hierarchy back in the day, and the Intelligentsia had a very high spot in that hierarchy. It's a very key point. You have to get that. But perhaps this is not inherently a bad thing. Let's call a spade a spade. We're not all equal at all things. Some people are more intelligent than others, and the more capable should be placed in positions where their skills can maximally benefit society. We all know the pain and anguish, as Joseph Campbell reminds us, that follows after those without proper initiation are placed in positions of power. As long as the mental consciousness structure held an exclusive claim to truth, this political and societal ordering schema persisted. So long as the irrational integral structure had not mutated, people were secure in the fact that they acted in accordance with the objective order of the world. Excuse me, I should have drank some water. But this would not last long. Sure enough, the Superman of rationality met his kryptonite in the form of irrationality. Since the beginning of the 19th century, Western civilization has non-consciously realized that these previously assumed objective hierarchies are actually contingent. They are a product of the mental consciousness structure of rationality and gain validity only insofar as rationality is perceived as being objective and exclusively valid. Einstein's unification of space and time into space-time, Planck's quantum mechanics, as well as philosophical pursuits like quantum logic and Heidegger's clearing, prove that what is deemed true by rationality is not exclusively true. If you want more evidence of this, just go check out my Kill Rationalism series. We get into it. Rationality, in the end, is important, is a projection made by the ego, a remarkably beneficial one when employed properly, but a projection nonetheless. The world of rationality maintains its validity, but forfeits its predominance. As just briefly outlined, we are starting to become consciously aware of this newfound openness of the world, though this is not necessarily a good thing. So when the old objective set hierarchies are non-consciously realized as contingent, there is an openness. We are loosening up these set objective rules, laws, guidelines, whatever it is. Now the world is open. You can probably see how this manifests in the real world, all these new lingos and neologisms and all this stuff. That's an expression of this new openness. Think your trans species identify as a dog or whatever. I know it's kind of stereotypical. I got that. But still, the point still stands. There's an openness where we're no longer set by the formerly objective standards. Though this is not necessarily a good thing. So we're becoming aware of this openness, but it's not necessarily a good thing. Postmodernity is more or less aware of this fact, but has argued the efficacy of irrationality in the stupidest and most destructive way possible. I will argue with any of you if you want. If this is what integral consciousness amounts to, we may as well not bother. So postmodernity recognized this openness, but of course we get the worst possible, the worst possible interpretation of it. There exists an efficient postmodernism, if you will, in the form of a Gebserian irrational integral consciousness. But that will be an article for another day. What is of focus now is the implication of this upsetting, UP-setting, of the previous order. So we are upsetting the previous order, and that's what's happening. How does this newfound recognition of the contingency of previously objective hierarchies affect our dear intellectuals? Well, with this recognition of contingency comes a further realization that it is not true that intelligence is distributed in the hands of an elite few, but is distributed widely and unequally throughout the entire population. Very important. So that false binary, it's either an elite few or equally distributed. It's not equally distributed, so it must be an elite few. No, it's unequally distributed. Well, we'll get there. Yeah, it's distributed widely and unequally throughout the population. It's got nothing to do with this false either or. Empowered by this knowledge, combined with the recognition that the intellectuals who used to play a disproportionate role in his fate and that of his countries are no longer perceived as objectively and inherently superior, the everyday man took it upon himself to improve his own circumstances. Armed with systems that empower him as an individual, capitalism, representative democracy, consensual governance, social systems too, he can now wrestle back his fate from the intellectuals. The previous superiority of the intellectual over the public has been undercut, and in many ways the public has become the patron of the intellectuals. So remember when I said the hierarchical order, and the intellectuals had a very good spot because they were funded, they had direct access to the king maybe, or the lords, or the oligarchs, whatever it is. Unfortunately, when you have, like I just said, these new systems emerge, capitalism, consensual governance, liberalism, all of a sudden the power and the capabilities of the individual are coming to the surface, are coming to the fore. They are manifesting. And as this is happening, people realize, oh, I'm not an idiot because I'm not one of these elite intellectuals. I have my own intelligence, even if it's not just ideas. I can be an engineer, I could be a farmer, I could do whatever. And of course, as this goes up, the intellectual's place comes down. That's the key point. However, as Sowell reminds us, this process does not occur in a vacuum, divorced entirely from the psychological complexities of the human experience. So as this process of the diminution of the status and place of the intellectual is, as the respect of the intellectual is being supplanted and replaced by the decency of the individual, the public, the mass, the dumb rubes that the intellectuals would say, this does not happen in a vacuum. This is not going to be this very easy transition where everything's fine. This is conditioned or streamlined through all the complexities and emotions of the human psyche, and it's not good. Intellectuals have been told since the third grade that they are superior to others. They are placed in gifted classes and are constantly reminded that they are college-bound. This superiority is affirmed, too, by their desirable place in the hierarchy. And if it's objectively true, how can they not feel better than the masses? Wouldn't you grow arrogant? I probably would, too. Another problem for the intellectual is that he, or she, no longer makes a disproportionate qualitative impact on the society in which he lives. Society now appeals to systems that express the wills and desires, Society now appeals to systems that express the wills and desires of millions, like the free market and social systems. As Sowell and Gebser brilliantly detail, this undercutting of the intellectual's status, especially considering that this process has been realized non-consciously, has bred an intense resentment in the intelligentsia. This resentment causes them to attack the systems that outperform them. So, as this process of the status goes, and they're replaced by these systems that express the wills and desires of millions, the free market, voting systems, liberalism, all this stuff, there is a deep, deep resentment, and we're going to get into it. Perhaps this is the reason why Noam Chomsky and other left-wing intellectuals of the world showered communist dictators with the praise I wish my mother had given to me as a young boy, while deriding the freest and most moral country in the history of the Homo sapiens species as the so-called free world. The top-down hierarchy and political organization practiced by authoritarian regimes not only saves the intellectual's sense of self, but offers him enormous power, a power that has been tasted before and is tortuously missed. So that's, I think, what it comes down to. You had the power, you didn't have it, you were intoxicated by it, now you want it back. The fact that you can't give it breeds resentment. So now you're going to, in a very resentful way, attack what has replaced you because it's better than you. The Stalins and Maos of the world turned to their favorite intellectuals for guidance, and because he wielded such great power, the turning of his ideas could correspond to a turning of history. This is the intellectuals. So when they see communists, they're not going to be moral people and denounce the totalitarianism, immoral evilness that's going on over there, they're going to say, wow, look at all the power they have. That's what we used to have. We used to have this impact on society. We used to order society top down. Why can't we have that? So I'm going to go praise those guys, and I'm going to denounce you guys for daring to care about freedom and morality. And I'm going to sit here and say, no, this is actually the real morally superior system because I get a special place in the hierarchy. But the masses were never in the gifted classes. They couldn't spell knowledge, let alone be so secure in it that it would surely propel them to the success that is their birthright. Of course, that's from the perspective of the anointed intellectuals. In reality, the masses are very smart. Just because I don't read or write Heidegger doesn't mean I'm not smart. There are very smart engineers, coders, people who do practical things, farmers, architects. They just don't do intellectual stuff in the sense of their end product is ideas. Their end product is a physical thing. That doesn't mean they're not intelligent. You guys messed up. That the individual common man can create his own success, act on his own agency, is an affront to the axiom that holds together the psyche of the intelligentsia. Those who are intellectually superior should be entrusted with the power to dictate the lives of the dumb masses. This is the axiom of the intelligentsia. They are wrong, and the reason they have this axiom is because they used to have this axiom back in this hierarchical ordering schema. It is not possible, according to Chomsky and Richard Wolff, for example, that the individual with the most knowledge, interest, and experience in his circumstance, in addition to being the one who becomes intimately aware of the cost of making the wrong decision, would make better decisions than some intellectual planner who possesses none of these attributes listed above, only knows the individual whose life he's dictating as a name on a spreadsheet, and is isolated from the cost of poor decisions. If Bernie Sanders, I'm looking your way. I despise you. You are a moron, and I don't respect you. Get out of here. I do not need some idiot Bernie Sanders type who doesn't even know I exist beyond a name on a paper, given all the power to dictate my life for me because he's decided he wants to virtue signal and make a bunch of empty promises to a bunch of people who can't freaking think past the 14-year-old level, okay? If everything was as simple as free this, free that, we'd all be living in a utopia right now. It's not. Give me the power to do it because I don't need some intellectual who doesn't even know I exist to plan my life because you've decided you've read Heidegger and Gebser, therefore you have all the power. I don't care. You don't have the most knowledge, interest, and experience in my circumstances, and if I make the wrong decisions, I'm the one who pays the consequences. You are saying that more effective decisions will be made by transferring power to someone who doesn't have any knowledge, interest, or experience in my circumstances, and who is isolated from the cost of a bad decision. And now you want to grandstand and get on your soapbox and virtue signal about how I'm evil and I don't want people to have access? Get out of here. I don't respect you. Get out. Chomsky's, Sanders, Wolff's, I don't respect you. But the destruction of all the systems that make America great is not the only crime of the intelligentsia. They have engaged in blatant racism, both during the 1920s and maybe a little earlier, anti-black eugenics. This is, to be clear, it was the intelligentsia who led that. When they came out here, and I need to make this very clear, I do not agree with this, but when they came out and they did a bunch of shoddy stats, and by the way, Sowell rips them for that. Sowell goes into the methodology of those studies that they did to prove the inferiority of certain groups, and he's like, this is a joke, it's a farce. It's very obvious you were emotionally biased going in, and you created these bullcrap stats, and now you're shoving these people in there, and now you're trying to bullcrap me. But that was the intelligentsia. The Woodrow Wilsons, the progressives, they supported them. Okay? They might not have called themselves progressive, but, or at the very least the intelligentsia. We'll put it that. We'll remove the progressive part. So that was in the 1920s. And then in 2020s, we have anti-white racism in the form of this social constructivism where every single thing in the world is meant to design, or is designed to oppress minorities. So we're allowed to just say them as blatantly anti-white things socially, and no one's going to say anything. The 1920s and 2020s have needlessly stoked racial and tribal conflict in the most diverse country in the history of our species. So now I'm listing off the crimes of the intelligentsia. So they did the racism in the 1920s and 2020s. They stoked more racial and tribal conflict. They crumbled in the face of an irrational onslaught in the form of the woke left and postmodernity, pushed knowing falsities as truth so long as they furthered their radical political agenda, and created a culture of fear, panic, and distrust among the academic circle in the form of social ostracization and knowingly false accusations of bigotry. So these are the crimes of the intelligentsia. This is the betrayal right here. Racism, cancel culture, knowingly pushing falsities as truth because they align with your ridiculous political narrative. All of that. Complete betrayal. Just a complete betrayal. What the intellectuals cannot see, tragically, is that the forfeiture of their social and political status is not personal. It is all part of a vast spiritual game we're playing, and all supposedly objective, rational hierarchies are coming apart. Not just the ones pertaining to the egos of academia. Even the common rules of marriage and family structure are being upset, emphasis on the perspectival rigidity presupposed in the concept of set. Whether this coming apart will make the full leap into an inefficient irrationality or continue, as it has for the past few centuries, to regress into an all too familiar deficient irrationality will remain to be seen. Better yet, it is not a matter of if this will happen, but when. The stakes could not be higher. Either adapt or enter a new dark age, as was the case when the deficient mythical structure prevented the rigidification of a then efficient mental structure in our collective consciousness. Thanks to Gebser and Sowell, we are now consciously aware of the process and stand in a prime position to channel these new energies toward positive, virtuous ends. Thank you for reading. Thank you for watching. So you could say at the end this is kind of a false either or irrational. I don't think it is. No, what happened? Remember, Gebser identifies the ancient Greeks as the pre-perspectival phase, and then we have the Renaissance. So when did the Greeks and, like, I don't know, let's say around 5,000, or not 5,000, 500 AD. We'll say that, around 500 AD. Okay, so what happened in that 1,000-year time span, which is a pretty long time span, don't you think? We had the Dark Ages. What was happening? It was the shift from the mythical to the mental. Before the mental truly rigidified itself and solidified itself in our collective consciousness, what did we go through? A millennia of extremely torturous, painful irrationality nonsense, okay? The death of entire peoples, cultures, all this terrible stuff. Awful, 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 awful stuff. We, thank you to Gebser, thank you to Sowell, have conscious awareness over this. We do not have to go through this, but we will go through it if we continue to hold on to our rationalism. It will usher in a new dark age. That is the entire reason why I decided to start this YouTube channel, to heal the spiritual present, not to sound too grandiose. I'm not saying I'm some god or anything, but I think it's important. So that'll be all. I hope you guys enjoyed. Academics, if you disagree, let me know. If you think the Intelligentsia has done actually a really great job, let me know in the comments. You have your own experiences. You have your own values, your own, I guess they call it media diet. So let me know. I don't claim to have objective knowledge. That's the whole point. I love you guys so much. You guys are the best. And please go watch my time as an intensity video in my latest Kill Rationalism, which also showed up in my Seeing the World Integrally video. So if you see Kill Rationalism part 15 or whatever, it wasn't a mistake. I did that on purpose because I think it's important. The reason I want you to watch that video is because this right here, time as an intensity, is the decisive factor about making the full effective leap into integral consciousness. The spatial enrichment aspect, the idea that you take the pre-rational, irrational, and irrational, kind of combine them and deploy them at whatever. That's cool. That's good. You can enrich that. It's not just that. You got to get time as an intensity. Hopefully, I break it down simply enough. So thank you guys. You're the best. I love you.